Hello, guys. Welcome to the first webinar. We're about to have a very nice conversation regarding public relations and the trade shows and how we can communicate that different worlds and make it together in a strategy. So I hope you guys enjoy it. And also you, Tina. So welcome.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited about the webinar today.
Good. Let's jump into the actual thing, because I'm really curious, actually. Let's start from the point that we understand that, trade shows and all of the business has one key element. There is the people. What would you consider as, in a consistent way to communicate with people for trade shows and that kind of thing?
Money 2020, we do 3 major shows every year. We do one show in Amsterdam for Europe, one show in the US, it's in Las Vegas in October, and we are doing Money 2020 Asia for the first time in April of next year in Bangkok. So these are big shows. There is a lot of planning that goes into a show like this. PR wise, there are a lot of things that I prepare for, obviously. I think that sort of going into the aspects of planning that show, what can you do PR wise to make this a success? And I think ultimately anyone who works in this industry, they would have to look at, what happens at the show. What do you have that is the most compelling to your audience? Who are your rockstar speakers? You have to determine your media market. What media outlets are you looking to reach? Is it business media? Is it vertical media? Are you really investing in broadcast this year? And how are you planning to reach them? Then you come to that point where you want to build relevant dialogue with the media, pre-show, during, and post-show. There's so many ways of communicating to the press today. Are you using your press releases? Are you using media pitches? Are you using video? I'm very fortunate to have a fantastic marketing video team that put out fantastic engagement in the format of video. So those are sort of the components. Of course, you have to plan for the media on site. Is there a well laid out press room? Can the media easily access and speak to your keynote rockstar speakers? If you have broadcast media coming, do you actually have a setup to be able to do a live remote if needed, or coming in and out quickly and capture the essence of a show, even though they may not have that much time on their hands? So there is a lot that goes into this.
So what you're saying that you're used to working at very tight deadlines for doing everything.
Yes, it becomes extremely hectic, especially the few weeks prior to the show and during the show. It is an extremely busy time. It's a major undertaking, but I love this environment, absolutely. So. And
speaking about you, how would you manage that kind of thing? Like, do you have any advice for people, that's going to be in a similar condition as you?
Teamwork here is obviously key. I am part of a fantastic marketing department that work alongside PR, of course, and I work alongside marketing. And there is a social team that pushes the messages through. We have a fantastic ops that I work with to make sure that everything is working. If I have a reporter coming in from especially broadcast, I think that requires a lot more than print media. If there is a live remote happening, can I square off an area where it's quiet? How do we accommodate media on site? So there is a lot of components. There's a lot of people that make this fantastic experience happening. PR in this capacity, I have a background in tech PR and nonprofit PR. This is so different because we are on site, we are live. It's not just me anymore. There's so many other things that work together to make this media coverage and the quality earned media happening.
And you mentioned that you guys on Money 2020, you have like different shows, different location. So I can imagine that you also have a different target audience. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Yeah. But even though if you have like a different target audience, there's might be still something that you can consider like a core strategy when messaging people. Well, what I want to learn actually. So
Yes.
so that's the idea.
Yes. I mean, there is, when it comes to global PR, it is culturally very different in each part of the world. We are essentially looking at the same type of media vertical going into these shows. We are, a fintech financial service show. We are the leading show in the world. So we are aiming for the same type of press. However, the dialogue with the media in Asia or in Thailand versus the dialogue with the media in the US at our Vegas show can be very different. We build those relationships differently. We did a launch, for example, in April this year, going to Asia, where we essentially met with reporters. We had a major launch event telling the world that we're coming to Bangkok in a year. Media function quite differently from, in the sort of in-person capacity. They have a different approach than they would have in the United States. So you always have to tailor the dialogue slightly differently. You have to make sure that you have understanding of how the media functions. You need to respect the press on site. This is very different, and this is, I think, the beauty of my position is that I do get to work with 3 continents right now, which is fantastic. So, but we do adjust the message. We tailor the stories to their needs. For example, in Asia, in what we experienced in Thailand, is that media do not want to necessarily meet in an exclusive capacity. We were thinking we could offer a couple of interviews to tier 1 media prior to the event or in a more private capacity. They don't want that at all. They like to meet together in a press conference format. They even compare notes with one another sometimes to make sure they get the story right. So there is no exclusivity.
I see
when
that.
dealing with media in that part of the world for this type of event. So these are all learnings. This is part of global comms.
So would you say that it's more about understanding the target audience and creating something for them, like specific for them?
Yes, absolutely. You have to adjust and you have to tailor and you have to adapt to the market that you're in.
It's very interesting, the idea of, understanding how a specific target audience think and works and, operate all of that and create a plan for that. So could you give us some examples of successful PR that you had in the past, especially for trade shows?
For some years, I tend to love surveys. Surveys that take the temperature on a particular audience, where we get a result back and we can say, well, this is what we found out. So previous position, I worked within the metaverse space, where I conducted a survey on how Gen Z perceives and intend to use metaverse, which is a very successful launch. This was in the very beginning of the metaverse movement, and we, get data that we essentially can put out to the media. So that traveled around the world, actually, press coverage going from the US to Asia on that one survey. So those are things that I enjoy doing. Getting the stats, getting the hardcore facts, always good.
In this business, in this world of PR, I can imagine, like, for all we just have discussed, that's quite challenging and requires a lot of flexibility, adaptation, and understanding. So if you could make a list, the biggest challenges you have faced, or at least what you consider in this industry, how would you say that?
There could be a new segment out that directly impacts your industry, that would put the PR and the comms team in a completely different position. Those are things that you have to consider. There is also the crisis communications aspect of
I can imagine.
big shows where you gather thousands of people every year. How do we prepare for any possible scenario? How do we build these messages beforehand in the event that something happens? Those are things that are very critical. Building relevant news stories on site that you feel can gain momentum during the show is also very important.
And you try to predict some of that, like, okay, this might happen at some point in the future, so let's start on a strategy in advance.
Well, we do know what's going to happen during the show.
Yeah,
It's very well
of course.
planned out. There is an agenda, so yes, there is some news stories that we can build from what happens at the show. That is planned ahead of time. Then there are things that can happen. Like I said, there can be something that's shifting in the news that day where we have to change our messaging, where we have to even respond to the industry that is acting in one capacity or another. Those are things that you always have to adjust to. And I think having a good team on site that can work together is so important.
And so since we're talking about, dealing with things that can kind of go out of control, and you have, of course, ways to deal with each one of these situations, I can assume that you have like a way to kind of measure the effectiveness of all of that, like any kind of key performance indicator. So we'd like to know more about it so we can understand how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what we look at here is obviously, media attendance.
Yeah.
How many media outlets, how many reporters,
Yeah.
how many people are registering before, how many people are coming in during the show. Those are important ways of measuring. Then there is, of course, the press coverage coming out of a show. How is it looking this year compared to last year? What kind of coverage are we getting? Is it more tailored towards Money 2020? How does the press coverage look? Those are KPIs that I think any PR professional would look at. But I also always look at, how do we make things even better next year?
So you have a part of your process dedicated to that kind of, analysis and say, okay, let's check on what we can improve for the next year show, that kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely. And we have media targets. We have our dream sort of media outlets.
Yeah.
It's very important to have goals. It's very important to always constantly just striving to be better.
So speaking of Money 2020, I can imagine that you have like plenty of resources for doing such very nice and big shows. But what advice you would give for companies which are not on that point? They have limited resources,
Yes.
but still want to have like a successful show and make everything goes perfectly as they are dreaming with.
For businesses attending any trade shows today, in any industry, really, I think PR is a fantastic tool if you are on a string budget. If you have one news story that you can build momentum around at that trade show. Is it a partnership with another company? Is it a new product? Is it a speaker that you have secured on one of the stages? Is it something groundbreaking to your industry that you are announcing? This one piece of news can generate that awareness and that publicity that you're looking for in a more cost-effective way than spending it on advertising and maybe a large sponsorship package if you don't have the budget for that. And different trade shows do different things. Some shows have what you call best in show. You can submit to the best in show. Maybe you get nominated for that. You get some extra attention at the show. Money 2020 is doing something called Call for Breaking News, where we ask all businesses and sponsors to submit their best news story. We then receive that within that deadline, and we're going through those news stories that are submitted, and we let those companies present the news that they are launching on stage.
But what about the don'ts? Are there anything that you would strongly recommend not to do in that matter?
Well, you have to look at your company and what you have in the pipeline as far as what you can communicate. You should never communicate something that hasn't been approved internally. You should never communicate a partner if the partner and that client is not on board, that hasn't approved your story, of course.
Yeah.
You have to make sure that you have a story that is of value to that audience at the trade show and to those vertical audiences that you're reaching, and make sure that the story is approved by all parties.
Okay, got it. I'll ask you just one more question, more like an advice in general. Like if you could put it on a phrase, like, okay, to achieve a good PR, you should do two dots, your phrase, please.
So two things to think about when you're launching your PR campaign. What is the most, how can you be more successful? And one thing is assess the markets. Who are your vertical markets that you are trying to reach? And then launch that news story. You are going to need the marketing team in your company to help you push that unified message. So I think those will be my two most important bullets.
Wow, got it. That was really impressive. Yeah. All right. So this was our first webinar here on ExpoFP, and thank you, Tina, very much.
Thank you so much, Matt, for having me. It's a lot of fun, and I hope I contributed to your first episode.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.